Oh.
Everyone. Hi. Sorry, I'm eating again. I've been in meetings non 9 a.m. So
It's
no
okay.
worries. It's
Okay.
totally, yeah, exactly. It's totally fine.
turn my video back on when I'm done chowing.
No problem.
Remember our reminder. Oh, actually, can someone see if they can rename themselves to put in your address and pronouns, please? If you can't, I'll see if I can change the
I'm not seeing it as an option.
Yeah,
I am
you-
able, but I'm a co-host.
Okay, now.
Yeah, I'm
try.
not seeing it either.
Oh yeah, now it's there.
Okay, so please modify your name to include your
Here we
street
go.
and general house area and pronouns.
Back to address.
I guess Chris Hong, we're going to refer to as G3 today.
G3.
Sorry, I just got out of class and you have to put your group number in your name.
I thought it was like a hurricane name or something.
G6. I think it was just Sarah T and I, right? That Jerome sent an email to. Okay. So yeah, so Jerome's not going to make it.
Chris, I added you as co-host.
I see. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah T. Okay. 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Becky, you should be able to rename yourself. I think I found the right control.
It's Becky Frank H.
Yeah, she always comes on as like one of her kids.
Becky comes in with a different name every single time.
Yeah.
Sarah LR, are you aware of anyone else who is not going to be making it tonight?
No one told me.
Okay.
EJ just texted me that he's trying to get in. He should be here soon.
Oh, he's in now.
Okay, cool.
Okay. 1, 2, 5, 8, 10. Sarah LR, can you give me a quick? I see we're missing Lisa and Jerome, who we know isn't going to make it.
Lisa responded to my text, so I expect her.
Okay. And then we're missing one other person, aren't we? 3, 6, 8,
Mike.
Mike, yes. Well, I guess we have a quorum, so
have
we can
quorum.
yeah. So why don't we get started? And then when folks jump in, if you could just watch
Sure.
the participants for me, that would be great. Sarah T, would you mind throwing that back in there again, just for the folks who just popped in, or copying pasting that? So if you look in the chat, I think Sarah is going to be throwing in that, I'm assuming, is the link to the agenda folder. Sarah?
I think I put up the whole folder.
Okay. So we'll get that in there for everybody. So welcome everybody to the, what month are we? February meeting of the of KFNA. We don't have any community members here. As I say every single time, I feel like I repeat myself, and I'm always sitting in this room. And so we are all community members. So if anyone would like to share anything on the top of the meeting, please, I'll be silent for 20 seconds if anyone wants to pipe in about community updates or anything like that. So. Okay, seeing none, we'll officially kick it off, and we'll do a call to order again of February meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda for tonight, which has been posted in the chat, and also an approval of January's minutes?
So moved.
A second from somebody?
Second.
Awesome, thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye, thumbs up, yes in the chat.
Hi.
Opposed and abstentions. Okay, awesome. Thanks everybody. We've got an agenda tonight that I think is really good and is going to set us up for some work kind of going forward. There's some cool stuff going on, especially around the two things we're going to be talking about, kind of our events and events that tie to very specific things that are happening in our community, and connecting community members together, and building kind of these, thinking about what community safety means. And so I think this is going to be, I wouldn't say this is the kickoff of a conversation, but I think this is the start of starting to talk about ways that board members can also get involved in some of these events and have influence over how this shapes out going forward. So I'm excited to have that tonight, and we're going to be kicking off kind of some much needed finance and budget updates for the board to kind of provide some insight and make sure everybody is aware of how our budget is looking, how our budget works, and some kind of key things that we may need to do with dollars, moving them around to be successful and spend that money and make sure it's in the right spots to meet community needs. So with that said, I believe the first item on the agenda we have is a budget overview, and I have your name, Alice, on that.
Okay.
If you are ready,
Yes.
I can kick it over to you.
Okay, and Sarah will be joining in because, so we have a few things in the budget folder that people can look at. We're not going to go over all of this in detail, but if you have any questions, please do ask them. And we are very fortunate. Sarah actually knows the ins and outs of this budget. Budgeting in governmental institutions is complex, and certainly our budget, because it's folded, it's so dependent on the city budget, is very complex. So we want to go over just a little bit about how it works, what it's looking like, so we can pick up that conversation that we had earlier in the year about how things are looking as we're going forward. So as we go forward in the year and we start to think about things like strategic planning and fundraising, that we have the proper context for that. So maybe just briefly look at the financial charts document that's in there. And just so we have an overview of the picture of it. Not all of the numbers come through on Google Docs, but what I want to just point out is most of our money comes from the city. That's that biggest in that top left in that top left chart, that's that biggest piece of the pie. We have also then we get some money from events. Some of that turns out to be pass-through money. We get money from fundraising. Then as we look at our expenses, most of our expenses are fixed in that it's staffing and rent and the newsletter. So that's in that chart. And then we have a chart of where most of the staffing time goes. And it's a variety of things. We had 2 staff people for part of the year in the 2019-2020 fiscal year. Now we have 1 person. And so that's a whole lot of buckets for 1 person to be trying to cover. There are other tabs on this that we won't go into that show some of the detail behind it. For some people are picture people, some people like to look at the data. So you can do that. But then I would ask everyone to look at, I think the more important thing is this wonderful document that Sarah LR has put together that kind of explains the structure of our budget. There are basically 3 pots of money we can draw on as we want to do our work for the coming year and the years ahead. So the first pot is the annual budget. And so we get money from these various sources, mostly the city. And then we we do a budget for that. We actually, with everything that was going on in 2020, we did not actually approve a budget in 2020. Our fiscal year started on June 1st. So we will be revisiting that in the spring and we will approve a budget for 2021. So this money comes from the Community Participation Program, CPP, and the budget has just actually been structured this way for the last few years. Earlier in the history of the organization, the funding stream was a little bit different. And I'll ask Sarah to maybe, if anybody's interested in history, to go back and do that. But left over from some of those projects in our prior funding streams, we do have some money in pot number 2 that are like reserves that are sitting in our checking account that we can draw on. Right now we have the freedom to do just about anything we want to do. Sarah can figure out how to do it. But as we go forward, that we'll have to be rethinking all of that. And then the third pot of money is money left over, which is more restricted and designated for certain projects in our NRP funds. And that's what Sarah's going to be addressing right after this discussion. Is we're going to need to begin to move some of our money from one pot to another pot, so we can move some funds into our operating funds. We can take some funds that are designated and tie them to specific projects, so that that money is more is a little bit safer, cannot be pulled back by the city. So that's what we're going to talk about as we go forward here. That's the next topic. A thing to know is that the city funding, last year we got about $54,000. The city is restructuring how they're funding neighborhoods. And there's an equity focus among neighborhoods. And so the money is being moved around, but there is also going to be about a third, at least, less money than there was in prior years, because some of the pot of money that we've been drawing from is going to be more directed to specific communities throughout the city. So the money is being calculated, what each neighborhood gets is being calculated differently. And some, and it'll be uneven as to how much each neighborhood's budget is cut by. Ours is going to be cut by about as much as anybody. So we're going to be going from getting as much as $80,000 to probably less than $20,000 in the next couple of years. So we're going to have to seriously rethink how to think about being a sustainable organization, what our goals are, and how we're going to fund it in the next several years. And obviously we're going to have to engage the community and our neighbors in this, because we'll need more community engagement to continue to do all the work that we've been doing, let alone the new work that we need to do. So that's kind of the overview. Sarah, I'm sure you've got more to add, but LR. No?
I do, sorry.
Yeah.
So it's super hard, I think, to look at spreadsheets in this sort of weird group format. I really wish we
Yes, it
could do
is.
this in person. But so just to revisit a little bit what Alice said and to get some history on this, there's a document in the financial folder. If everyone could look at the one fiscal FY21 quarterly report. If you can find that and open that up, I just want to show that to you because that is our spending of year to date. So we have just finished the second quarter of this fiscal year. So this is actually numbers spent. And because we didn't have an approved budget to put it against, on the second tab, you can compare our spending to date and our income to date in column E to our spending and income to date in the previous fiscal year in column G. And then I shows the percentage of change. I do want to caution you, please don't panic about income when you look at spreadsheets about the neighborhood association. It all has to do with how we are paid on a reimbursement basis and when those reports get filed and paid by the city. So it often looks like we haven't brought in any money from the city, and it's true, we haven't, because those reports haven't been filed yet. So this report is what I will be using to work with Alice in the coming month to put a budget together, a proposed budget for the next board meeting. So we'll base it a little bit off of history, but also off current year expenses, with some fingers crossed that the pandemic is going to end, to make our best guess estimate about what the budget will be for the Kingfield Neighborhood Association from June 1st, 2021 through May 31st, 2022. The timeline of this is you guys will have a month to look at this, ask questions. We can work on revisions to this, and it will come back to the board in April. If needed, it can come back to the board again in May, but the goal is to have an approved budget before a new board is elected, who then has the task of carrying that new budget, that plan for the year forward. So to make sure that ideally a new budget is approved before whatever date is set for the annual meeting in May. So again, the plan is to have this coming forward for the March meeting, so there's enough chance to talk about it. And then I just want to reiterate the point that Alice said. The budget isn't really a pot of money. The budget is what we need in our best guess to run the organization for the year going forward. And we use all these different pots of money to make it up. We've had the luxury for the last many years that the bulk of what we needed was provided from community participation funding from the city of Minneapolis. As that goes down, if our expenses stay the same or increase, we need to find other sources of money to fill that gap. And so there are traditional ways of doing that, which are grant writing, which are pulling from our reserve fund bank account and from moving NRP, Neighborhood Revitalization Program funding, into buckets where we want to, where it needs to be spent. And then there might be other ways that we've never thought of. So just so people understand, the challenge will be if expenses stay at about the level that they've stayed at and no new buckets of money are found to fill those gaps, KFNA is facing about a 4 to 5 year existence. So it will be, I would say, all of our challenge in the coming year to figure out how do we start filling those gaps in different ways.
So the good news is we have reserves that can carry us for a period of time while we're rethinking and reinventing how we do business and how we get our funding. But the bad news is there doesn't look like there's any way forward right now to change the trajectory of the city spending. Many people have tried, but that doesn't look very favorable currently.
Can we open it up to board members to ask any questions that they would have on anything, both related to the individual kind of documents and kind of the last point that Sarah and Alice made around kind of the next 4 to 5 years of the organization?
I have a question, and just out of curiosity, Sarah, do you know if other neighborhood associations are in the same boat?
Yes. Very, I'd have to count. Most of the neighborhood associations we work with will see a reduction of funding. Most not as severe as what Kingfield is facing. We're facing a 60% reduction of funding over the next 3 years. Lyndale's seeing closer to an 18% reduction. There are a few neighborhoods who will see an increase. And as we talked about in the board training that we had last week, one of the challenges I see for those organizations is even an increase does not really leave them with a robust organization for the needs of their community.
What are they basing the numbers that they decrease individual associations funding by?
They are basing it on a couple of different statistics. I actually don't know exactly what they crunched.
This is, yeah, we can share the link to this. This is the Neighborhoods 2020 program. And so there's a ton of information. And like, we have like spreadsheets that show like, here are the money. You're like, here's the metric that they're house like rent burdened or like cost burdened households. You have a percentage, therefore you are like allocated this much money, population, those sorts of things. So we can share, I think thank you, Sarah T, shared that link in there. And we're kind of in a unique space as a larger neighborhood association who received a decent amount of funding in the past, but also is a fairly, especially in the last 20 years, a fairly affluent, more predominantly white community. And therefore, when we look at the metrics that the city laid out, it's a big reason why neighborhoods like ours and other neighborhoods across the city saw decreases or increases in funding. So
I think, if I recall, I think Sarah Cheetah can answer this better because she's a little closer to it, but there are 3 buckets that they were using, and as Chris said, there are a lot of underlying statistics. None of them were how many people actually live in the neighborhood, as I recall. While we're more affluent, say East Harriet, which is, from what I see, is at least as affluent as we are, is not, they haven't been cut as badly either. I think there are just a lot of things in the underlying very complicated modeling that they were doing, that they were trying to get at equity issues, which is laudable, but I'm not convinced that the model was as accurate as they thought it was.
And if anybody's interested more in having that discussion around neighborhoods 2020, I'm sure we could sit into it. As we talked, I think this was in our training on Friday or Thursday or whatever, we're down the road with that. I don't say that ship has sailed, but we have the funding that we have now. And so we can definitely look at it. We can definitely consider it. And I think it's worth seeing how it was decided, but we're more on a trajectory of now as how we as an organization respond to the level of funding that we have, and how we, I would say, supplement and diversify that funding so that we are not entirely reliant on the city to exist as an organization, because it could be cut again. It could be completely gone. If we're at the whims of one funder, we're at the whims of one funder. So
That's right.
any other questions about budget? Again, individual or long-term stuff?
I'm curious, the individual donations that are, it looks like we got just a hair over 2,000, which is pretty much steady, a little bit under, I guess 10% under what we had for the second quarter. These are, quarter.
It's only through November.
Okay. So have we had an uptick in that with the push for donations? Sorry.
We got about $6,000 at year end. By year end.
Giving was up this year.
Yes.
Was okay. And sorry,
Yes.
My roommates expressed himself. How much were we up?
About 6. Isn't that right, Sarah? That's what I'm remembering.
Yeah, it's still slowly coming in,
Okay, good. So it's up. It's not exponentially up, but it's up, and there certainly are more things we can do to increase it.
Can I ask about an individual line item? This year, $5,808 in contract services / consultants, as compared to last year, which was like $1,500. Do you know what that expense would be?
We are in June through November. So just as a reminder, these specific line item questions, I can give you like better answers if you ask me before the meeting, because I'll actually go look it up. But contract services are bookkeeping. There are our tech guy who answers like help questions, helps with the website, and also formats the e-news so it's readable on all our things. And I believe contract services for this period also covered the artists
Sure.
that we did murals with after George Floyd's murder. And it possibly, I'm trying to think if it covered the uncomfortable. That might have went under grants. I know it covered the artists.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that's.
Okay.
I was just wondering why.
Yeah, that makes sense. And
that
I guess if you have a chance, Sarah, and you could just take a quick look at it after the meeting and
Yeah,
send a
I'm
note out.
not,
Yeah.
it possibly could have included the money for Theater of Public Policy. That was, I could have categorized as contracts because it was for people.
Sure.
So.
Any other comments or questions that anyone has specifically on budget? Anything, Sarah or Alice, you would like to share or close out on? I know Sarah, you wanted to talk about plan mod for that stuff, but I guess I'll just maybe say if there's anything else anyone has or any other questions on this, please share them.
Yeah, please do. And then just to repeat, we'll have a large chunk of the March agenda on budget. And questions like Chris just had, questions that you have, anything that can come to me early. I'll try to put in the budget with comments so you can see where I'm grabbing the numbers from. But if you have questions before the meeting, feel free to ask.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks. Sarah, do you want the next item agenda relate to the budget is the NRP plan modification? Do you want to cover that?
I do, and I want to open it up. So it's also in the finance folder. If people can maybe copy the language. Sorry, I thought I had it open.
I can share my screen, Sarah, if that helps.
That would be great.
Okay.
Okay, so back to the conversation about the pots of money. Kingfield has approved 2 separate plans called Phase 1 and Phase 2 Neighborhood Revitalization Program plans. Those plans had a whole bunch of different strategy lines and had about $4 million allocated to the neighborhood for various projects. Not all of that money has been spent. And some of this money had been taken back by the city of Minneapolis in 2010 to use for city purposes to set up the Office of Community Engagement. So this money has been slowly being paid back to neighborhood associations. And this chunk of money was the final payment that KFNA got back from the loan that essentially we gave to the city. So there is $75,100. It sits on 3 different line items in what is known as the Neighborhood Revitalization Plan for Kingfield Neighborhood Association, and it is not contracted. That means it can't be spent until it is contracted. So this ask is to bundle those dollars together and move them to a strategy called affordable housing and contract them. The act of contracting them makes it a little bit harder for the city to come take that money for their own uses. So it's a protection, but it also allows the neighborhood association to spend it more quickly because it's already designated, not necessarily for a project, but for a purpose. So funds in this affordable housing strategy might be spent to be part of the loan program that KFNA offers to affordable housing builders. We have $250,000 that we loan to people building affordable housing in the neighborhood. And then that has a low interest rate that's forgiven if they complete the project in a year. We have also used affordable housing dollars as grants to affordable housing builders, or there may be another purpose that has not yet been dreamt of. For example, purchasing a piece of property that eventually an affordable house will be built on, or something. So we're not committing it to a purpose by moving it yet. We're just moving it to a strategy for affordable housing. The reason why the board is reviewing this language is if you agree that this is what should be done, this moving of money has to be presented to the community for their input. They'll vote basically at this point, because we're in a digital era, we'll have a process where it will be publicized through our e-news and people will log on and cast a vote of support or a vote of not support for the moving of the funds. And then the board will gather again and review those and say, we endorse what the neighborhood said regarding these funds.
Sarah, is it a simple majority of who votes that would allow us to move the money, or how does that work?
Correct. So it's not a percentage of the neighborhood. It's not, it is, if 50 people show up and vote yes, it passes. If 50 people show up and vote no, it doesn't pass.
I'll also just say, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Sarah, the goal of presenting this at this meeting was to give the board visibility to it. And then the board, we're trying to give kind of some time in between the notices and discussions of these and then voting on them. So the notice and discussion would be at this meeting, which is what we're having right now. And then we would vote to move this to a community vote at our next meeting in what would that be, March. So we're not going to be voting on this right now. So don't feel like you have to absorb it but this would be the time to ask questions and have that discussion. And then we would hopefully be moving this fairly quickly in March.
And then just as another budgeting consideration, I do want to mention that KFNA has roughly $300,000 in NRP funds on different strategies. And these are funds that the board could ask the community to move towards a special project if they're not on a line that will work for them, or if they're $25,000 or less, the board can make a decision to move them on their own. So for example, if the funds coming from the city are $50,000 and a budget is put together that's $150,000, $100,000 of programming money could be one of those requests for an NRP plan mod that the board would ask to move.
Any other questions or discussion on this? David?
Is there an obvious downside to moving the funds? Like what are the three separate line items currently?
One is oh gosh, I had this open forever. I think I just closed it.
Yeah.
I believe one is a mixed use building, support for mixed use developments. I have no idea what the $100 is on, but obviously $100 on a line item is not going to be a valuable project. One is mixed use for mixed use development, which is very likely mixed use, meaning there's commercial and there's also apartments. That could as easily also be affordable housing. If you think of a situation like Butter, as it could be a mixed use development. The other one, I can look it up while you guys are doing something else if you want me to know for sure. But part of the feeling is the pots of money are so small and there's no programs designed for those. Whereas we're moving forward with affordable housing programs, that it's better to have it in a more active strategy line.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense.
And Sarah, how long does the community have to vote on this?
At least 21 days.
Okay.
It can be longer. I will say that the original hope for these funds was to move them to affordable housing and immediately put them in the pot of funds that's loaned to the City of Lakes Community Land Trust. We don't know that CLCLT is going to go forward with their project on 39th and Blaisdell right now due to the cost of new construction. If they do, it would be super useful to get these dollars loaned out, because essentially once they are used for a housing purpose, they're released from that purpose. And when they come back from that loan to the neighborhood association, they can be used anywhere. They don't have to be used on housing again. So one of the big restrictions that we struggle with NRP dollars is more than 50% of the funds had to go to bricks and mortar construction of housing.
Any other questions on this, Sarah? I think it would be helpful if we could share that. I think it was that
It's a
document.
link.
It's
That
at
link.
Plan Net.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
it's a link.
from the city, so everybody can see what those 3 buckets of money would be.
I just can't talk and search at the same time. So
Yeah.
as soon as I'm not talking, I'll go find it.
And there were 2 questions in the chat. One, we have moved funds in the past before, correct?
Yes.
And then Lisa was also wondering, how has turnout been on community votes in the past?
To Lisa's point, and Lisa knows she served on the board before, the board regularly moves funds, typically more in the $25,000 range, because that's where you don't need community approval. Input, because it's been at annual meetings, has ranged anywhere between, if there's a community vote, 30 and 100 people, or whoever shows up at a meeting, at those meetings. We have not done this process without an actual community meeting before.
Are we are we required to get so many people voting then? Because I know with when we do them at meetings, isn't it, it's a percentage of the people that show up have to vote. But if we're sending it to a percentage of our community, i.e. our distribution list, does it have to be a percentage of those people?
It doesn't. It doesn't. And Araya keeps asking me, Araya Fine is our NRP specialist with downtown. He's like, well, how many people do you think it would be good to have vote? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, if it were at an annual meeting, it would be somewhere like 50. But turnout online could be better. Or it could be worse, especially if it's not controversial. For someone to take an extra step to go research, a lot of people might be like, oh, money's going to affordable housing. Who cares? And not even bother to weigh in. So I really don't know how to judge. And in the city's asking us more what we think than telling us what it needs to be.
And I think this would be a unique opportunity. Obviously, one of the discussions that we've had continuously over the last 2 or 3 years has been the lack of affordable housing in our neighborhood, the need for KFNA to try to do more around affordable housing. And so I think that this is both perceptually and practically something that hopefully would get community members interested, engaged, and excited about KFNA doing things in affordable housing. And so I think we kind of we have to frame it that way, because that's what it is, and say, hey, hey, we're moving money. We want to do stuff. We want to do projects. We're struggling because like Sarah mentioned with Community Lakes Land Trust, it's a challenge to build right now, but this is something that we're invested in and we're putting dollars behind it. So I would hope that both as we show that to the community, and also as community members see that and see that, hey, there is money that we could that we could get behind or help support or whatever around different affordable housing projects. So yeah, I would want as many people voting on it as possible, and as many people voting, as just an engagement as possible.
Speaking of which, if I can do a plug before the end of the meeting, tomorrow night is a fundraiser for affordable housing. It's the virtual edition of Kingfield Empty Bowls. So if any of you are free between 6:30 and 8, tickets are on our Facebook group and on our website. There's an Eventbrite. It's a donation amount split between the partnerships of CLCLT, Beacon, which operates Nicollet Square, and us for work that we did at the encampment, or just to have some extra funds to put towards stuff like that. Becky, I know you have a ticket already. Thank you for doing that. That's great. And Tane Tane Danger, who led the Let's Get Uncomfortable sessions, him and one of his improv partners are doing a Kingfield-centric trivia. So it should be super fun. So it would be great to have the board present. Chris just let me know tonight that he can't do the welcome and intro. So if anyone else from the board would like to do that and introduce Stacy, I would welcome you to let me know. And I can work with you just on talking points for that. It would be great to have a new face communicating to the neighbors. I think we have 40 people signed up to attend so far, so it's really great.
It's a low bar for introductions. I oftentimes do introductions and I don't think they're great. So you can take that role over from me. We are getting close to time on the agenda. I saw Sarah T, you had, yeah.
Yeah, just a quick comment and maybe a question too. So just going back to the plan modification here real quick. So am I understanding that the next steps are that next month the board will vote on this, on whether or not to put it to a community vote? Is that correct? And then that vote would coincide with our annual meeting?
The plan would be that it will come back to the board next month. The only thing that might change is if City of Lakes Community Land Trust does say that they are going to build new construction. That could be an addition to this language. And that might also be a reason to fast track this faster than the May board vote, but that would all depend on their construction timing and when they would need to sign on a loan.
Okay, and so in if this does go to a community vote, then obviously we want to make sure that people are as informed as possible to understand what is being asked here. And so to what extent are we clarifying the project that the money would be used on? Is the intent to use it for City of Lakes Land Trust, or to have it more broadly slated for a more general affordable housing category? Like, would we present some options to people essentially? Or
No.
can we?
Could you? Yes, but the way the language is written now is what the vote would be on. Simply moving it to affordable housing. So when money in the NRP plan sits on a strategy line, it's not actually available to be contracted. It's just on the line. There actually is a 25-page document contract that has to be written with the city to create a program to spend that money. So that's what I was saying. When it's on affordable housing, we have one program operating right now on affordable housing, which is the loan program that we loan money to affordable housing entities. If we want to create a new type of affordable loan program, we can, but nobody's really come up with one at this moment. That could be a purchase land program. That could be a, I have no idea, because if I did,
I like that idea, Sarah T. I don't know if my kind of feedback on that would be, we've been talking as executive committee level, or maybe like about like a year-end survey, and maybe like instead of like tying it directly to this thing, like that's more of a broad question that we ask. That's like, hey, KFNA works in affordable housing. What do you care about the most, and what would you like us to spend money on as it relates to our broader kind of like goals? I think that would be a great thing to include in like a year-end survey to the community.
Would it be easier to posit this to the public as, if we want to be able to use this money at all, we need to move it somewhere so we have access to it? this is a place that we've created to do that. And then once, once there's access to it, then that we can figure out what the next step is. But otherwise, it's not protected right now. It could be taken back away, if I'm understanding things correctly.
Yeah.
So this is literally, we need to make this one move so that we can take advantage of this for our own community. Does
That's
that,
correct.
is that sum it up? Maybe it's better to simplify it that way rather than to focus it on the affordable. I mean, the affordable housing is definitely a good line to be able to attach that to. But then once it's moved onto that line, then it's able to be distributed to other places as needed. We just need to get it out of that bucket and into another bucket that we can use.
And so what I guess I would maybe advise, Sarah, if you can write up whatever that language that we're going to pass on to the community, that should be what we vote on at the next meeting. If it's what we have, and I took the screen share down, but I think if anyone has input on that, please, I would say share that like you just did, Mike. I think that's good. And then Sarah can come with that to the next meeting, and that is what we will be voting on, if that makes sense to everybody. And we are over time, so I want to be sensitive of that. Are there any other further questions or comments specifically on the plan mod? Great. I'm going to move it to Sarah T. Talking about executive director review, timeline and process. If you are ready, Sarah.
I am. Okay, I just put a link in the chat here to the folder in the board document where you will see, excuse me, a few things here. The first link is the proposed process for the executive director review. The second is job description for executive director review, or sorry, for our executive director. Third, we've got a Google form. And then the last one is the full KFNA personnel policy. So if you want to open up the first document here, review process and timeline gives you some context. Basically, it is a function of the KFNA Executive Committee to deliver a performance review to our executive director on an annual basis. And we are seeking all of your assistance in helping to put together that review. And so essentially, what that looks like is having folks take a look at the Google form here to share your feedback. That will then be put into an overall written review and for a discussion with our executive director. But just to back up a second here, there's really two parts here. I think in conducting this executive director review, which is one of our responsibilities, I think we'd also like to update our human resources policy, or at least, take a look and make sure that this personnel policy, the human resources policy, still works for us as an organization. It was last updated in 2013. And then, of course, we want to take a look too at the executive director job description, which was last updated in 2005, and make sure that that still works for us as an organization as well. And I'm sure, Sarah would say that her job has probably, evolved some over the years. And so, we want to get the feedback and make sure that the job description is accurately reflecting the work that's being done and that we as an organization want to have done. So at our next meeting, we'll go into a little bit more about personnel policy. For the time being, I think if you take a look at the personnel policy, the performance review piece of that policy specifically, you'll see a couple of things that I want us to keep in mind, just as we embark on this performance review. First of all, that it's a positive and interactive process. I mean, I think that in general, performance reviews are an opportunity to talk about, strengths, areas of growth, I think interactive is really important too, because while we are being asked to provide performance feedback for our executive director, we also want to certainly make sure that Sarah has an opportunity to share with us accomplishments and strengths and performance goals and things like that, and to have it be more of a discussion. And also to ensure that we receive feedback too as an organization and as a board for areas where we can grow and continue to improve. So you can see a little bit more about the performance review policy there. I'll go through the process real quick here. So we've talked as an executive committee about the performance review process and kind of came up with this plan here for the next few meetings. The Google form reflects the current evaluation that is in our policy, so that we don't want to change that. We probably can't change that midstream here. We want to make sure that the review is being conducted in a way that the policy indicates. And as we go through this process, if we decide board staff that we want to change things going forward, we can certainly have that discussion and make those necessary updates to the policy. So the Google form basically asks each of us to provide a ranking for 4 different performance categories: administration, interpersonal, individual, and leadership. It allows for open-ended comment on these performance factors. And then there's 3 open-ended questions as well, where people have the opportunity. We really wanted to focus here on the top highlights, the top area of improvement, the top performance goal for this next year. And then you'll see here reference to executive director self-reflection narrative. This is something that Sarah has put together for us to review. And so that will be shared. I'll be sending an email out after this that just gives everybody the direct link, due date, things like that. And it will also include a link to this narrative so that you can see. We requested that it be within 2 pages and really focused on top highlights, top areas of improvement, top performance goals for next year. So you can see that and take that into account as you are filling out the form. We're asking for everyone to provide feedback before our next board meeting. And then after our March 10th meeting, when the executive committee, when we have one of our regular meetings, we'll be taking a look at that feedback. We'll be meeting in executive session, which essentially means that it'll be a board member meeting where we'll be taking a look at the feedback and discussing any themes, and begin writing the written review document, and then planning to have a discussion. And then we'll also talk about any sort of feedback from the HR policy and job description. Then we've proposed that at the April meeting, the entire board would meet in executive session to be able to take a look at that written review, excuse me, before the actual annual review discussion with our executive director, which would take place mid to late April, approximately. Let's see, what else can I say here? Are there any questions? I guess just to put it in a further context here, like 2020 has been a year and then a lot. And so, that's not lost on me as I think about undergoing a review, which, as I understand, hasn't happened for a while, Sarah, that the board has delivered a review. And so, yes, I'm very aware that, this is taking place after 2020, which has just been extremely trying circumstances for us all. And so I certainly want to put that into context, just as KFNA has responded to the circumstances over this last year and really had to reimagine a lot of the ways that we're doing things and how we're working with neighbors and how we're delivering content and things like that. Does anybody else, does anyone have questions? And executive committee, if any of you would like to jump in with any additional comments, please feel free to do so.
The only top comment I would make is just thank you for putting this together. This is something that has been on my mind for the last 3 years, and I would throw myself under the bus and say this is something that I've dropped the ball on. And I just appreciate the thoughtfulness and the time that you put into this. And I feel a lot better now that it is that we're moving forward to something. So that's awesome. So thank you. That's my only input. And I would also just say, when people are looking at the Google form, just know that the Google form that's linked in this folder is like the back end of the Google form. So Sarah, I think you mentioned that you'll send out a link which will actually get people so that they can fill it out. So you're not gonna, if you try to fill that out, you're not actually gonna be able to, or you could share it with yourself or whatever. But just know, don't try to fill out that form in the folder.
So we'll get that information. Just to quickly redistill what you had said, Sarah, what are the 2 to 3 bullet points that each of us need to know when we're going through? What do you need from us?
Yeah, absolutely. Look for the email that will give you the link to the Google form to fill out, a reminder that it's due by March 10th, and it'll give you links to the personnel. I'll include the personnel policy specifically in there, and then links to Sarah's narrative, the 2-pager document, and the job description too. One more thing to note. So when you look at the Google form questions, let's see, 1 through 4 have, they talk about leadership, individual, interpersonal, and then they've got some subcategories, and then they've got these rankings: outstanding, significantly exceeds expectations, and so forth. When you go out to the personnel policy, which I'll link here too, if you go to pages 8 through 12 of that, I'm sorry if this is kind of administratively clunky here, but when you go out to the personnel policy and actually look at the pages that talk about the performance review, you'll see definitions for each of these. So you'll see when we talk about individual, when we talk about interpersonal, every single one of those categories has a very clear definition of what we mean by that. And then each of those rankings also gives you a narrative of what it means to exceed expectations and so forth. So I would say, please take a look at that contextual information, because like when I look at the category individual, that doesn't really mean a lot to me until I actually go out and read the definition of what that includes. Does that make sense?
It does.
So I'm just gonna copy and paste something in here in the chat just to show you the level of detail that's in that document, and that can help us make sure that we are doing this process justice, essentially. And now I'm having trouble copying and pasting. Let's see. That's a great question though.
To echo Chris, nice work on this. Looks outstanding.
Thank you. For some reason I can't. Okay, I'll keep working on that.
Any other questions as it relates specifically to executive director review, or just kind of general, if there's any general staffing questions or anything like that? Okay, thank you, Sarah. I'll say look for that email, and then we'll move forward through this process. So we are a touch behind, so I will move us very quickly over to 100 Days of Community Program. And Katie, we and your meeting and a half assigned this one to you, so thank you for taking it on. Yeah, well, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Cool. So I'm going to just describe these 3 ideas that have emerged from a group of neighbors, sort of in response to the increase in crime in the neighborhood in the city, and figuring out ways to respond to that proactively. Also recognizing we will cross the threshold of a year of COVID, and people like being excited about more opportunities to continue some of the like fun and community building neighborhood stuff. And so I'll just describe the things that we're proposing, and then I think we're going to break into small groups to talk about them in more detail. And just to say, the group of people who are proposing this include people who are really involved in supporting the encampment at MLK Park, and then a variety of us who have sort of been in touch since the summer and since the uprisings, and especially since some of the meetings that happened in MLK Park and in our different blocks, creating like some of the networks for safety just block by block in the neighborhood. So the three ideas are, and maybe to say one other thing about process, Sarah T had the great idea, and we've worked with Sarah LR, et cetera, we're going to first present these ideas to the block leaders in a meeting next Friday, get more of their thoughts and buy-in and participation, and then unroll it to the neighborhood. So this is step 0.1, and then we will do that next step and then unroll it. Three ideas are, one, to do a 100 days of community. What this will like tangibly be is a calendar that I will make in my separate life. I am partly a graphic designer, that will have available around the neighborhood as is possible. That'll just include both simple ideas for some community building, some tangible suggestions around safety, and a bunch of fun things, which you can see the link in the agenda. Raquel, who some of you may know, proposed this initial list of ideas along with a couple other folks, including Dan from Butter, and a few people in the neighborhood Facebook group have had the walking group ideas. So what that will most look like is, yeah, a calendar that we can propose to people and then share and promote the sort of ideas and events throughout those 100 days. Just to note that when you extend, if we begin this in like late February, if you extend out 100 days, that gets us into May, both being Memorial Day, and then we're getting close to the anniversary of George Floyd being murdered, which could be a time for a lot happening in the city. And that just might end up being like a nice stretch of time for us to be covering with events to build community. So when we break into small groups, I think it'd be awesome to specifically get any other like really specific ideas that people have that they'd like to add to that list, but also any reactions to the ones that we already have. The second idea is to propose a fundraiser to support some of the initiatives that the Office of Violence Prevention is supporting. We don't have specifically what those will be yet, but we will try to be clear about that by the time we have the meeting with block leaders next week. The idea here is acknowledging the extreme generosity that the neighborhood has had in supporting the MLK encampment, and kind of the learning of the people who are most involved in that being that people like really appreciate having a real thing to contribute to that is also attempting to address root cause. And so if we can try to do some fundraising to projects that are about violence prevention and supporting people around the stuff that might be some of the root cause for like burglaries that are happening, just helps like be really not pretend that this is coming out of nowhere, and also be proactively addressing it. We also sort of talked about wanting to lend some support to the Office of Violence Prevention. Even if we don't all agree with all the things they're doing, they're currently being put on a platform often directly compared to the police. Like there's many events that are happening where it's the leader of the Office of Violence Prevention and Chief Arredondo. The Office of Violence Prevention has a fraction of the budget of the police. And so the more that we can do to actually like really support the very creative and important programs that they're doing, given that they don't have the money behind them, but like could have the community support, that could really go a long way in helping bolster that. Because we're never going to be able to actually see the success of those projects if they aren't bolstered in the eyes of the community and giving attention and also funds. Then the final thing is we want to propose a couple of sessions. The format of this is like TBD, but workshops or sessions with a community member who's a therapist and has done a lot of community work. She's on the board of JCA, about fear. She's done a lot of research and is somebody who knows about the way fear operates in our minds, and like especially in reaction to things like being on Nextdoor app all day, or like what it means to actually react to the kind of things that have been happening in the neighborhood. She herself experienced a pretty intense incident of street crime this summer in her neighborhood in Cedar Riverside, and has just put together some like essentially training or workshop space to just do learning, to help people actually like learn about the way our brains work and engage with fear, given that it's just really real, that that's something that's happening in, not just in our neighborhood, but around the city. So I will stop there. Maybe we want to take a couple minutes if there's questions, and then do small groups to just do, yeah, more brainstorming.
Yes, thank you, Katie. Are there any questions specifically about what we're looking at here, or what we want to accomplish in this discussion? There are kind of some questions in the agenda, and then hopefully put in some of the answers and some of the ideas that everybody has into kind of a note page, and then we can provide that feedback back and continue to kind of evolve this. So any questions or comments before we break up into groups?
The groups are numbered, so when you do see the breakout rooms pop up, it'll have a number attached to it. Remember what your number is so you can fill in the correct notes.
Fancy. I like it.
Yeah, I would just say I'm glad for the opportunity to have this discussion. I've had neighbors approach me knowing I'm on the board, asking, you know, what is KFNA doing? Those types of things, trying to like get perspective, trying to find out about action. And people both, people coming at it from a lot of different angles too. People expressing fear, which is, like Katie said, very real. People expressing fear of calls for more police presence in the neighborhood. And I think people also kind of wondering too about just, you know, how others are feeling and doing, and wondering, you know, about some of the social media posts that they're seeing, and kind of wanting an outlet to talk about that. So I'm hopeful that this campaign can really, because there's so many different pieces of it, can really provide a lot of options for people to plug in a number of different ways.
The only other thing that I would add too is that we always talk about kind of being, as an organization, being both like supportive and like an agglomerator of community's input and community ideas. Speaking frankly, I feel like sometimes we've, especially around public safety, we've talked about it a lot. We talked about it a lot as a board, but how we do in the community as it relates to public safety, I think has been a little bit of a weak point this year. And I am excited to have community members be interested in this, have a group be interested in this, and have people kind of take on roles and do things in the community that are active, that are community building, and that are specifically focused on public safety. And so we as an organization, as all volunteers and as a board, can't do everything. And so I think the input that we can provide and the support that we can provide to things like this I'm really excited about. So
can I just verify, Katie, if you can look in the chat, is the list that I posted in there the one that you are asking board members to add to?
Yeah, and I don't think you can literally type into that document. So if you want to check that out in small groups, and then type any additional ideas into the notes document.
And the notes document then would come, the one that's attached to the board packet? Okay, so one person in each group will need to make sure that they have access to the notes. I won't be in a group, but let me just add that the concern came to me via 3 different individuals today about the trials coming up in March. And I did talk with Sarah Kettering about it today also, to make sure that we are putting out tangible actions and plans or art projects and information regarding that as part of the 100 days. So however that fits in.
cool.
Okay.
If there aren't any other questions, Katie, anything else you wanted to share? Otherwise, we can break them into groups. Are we doing 4? You said, Sarah?
4 groups or 3 groups?
4? Is that okay?
And can we afford 10 minutes?
Yes, let's please come back at 8:25. Is that okay?
Yeah, we still need time to break out again for events, so it's cutting it close.
Yep, I think we'll be 5 minutes
Okay.
behind.
That meeting too, is that open to everyone or, okay. Do we have information on that?
Yeah.
I can
Sarah, can you
share a
that
link
information?
out in the e-news this week. There was, hey, if you want to be a Block contact, sign up here, and then you can sign up for the 100 Days of Community campaign. We can have more than one Block contact per street. It's a great way to get to know someone else. Basically, you're just communicated on everything and asked to work on it together. So I can share that specifically with the board.
Awesome. Any other comments or questions?
Two things really quick, and it's a language thing, but I've heard it and I just saw it. So not to point fingers at people, but we've tried to be super intentional about changing the language from Block leaders to Block contacts, because Block leader is CCP safe police language. And it's a system that they maintain over the city that they have never shared with neighborhood organizations. So our contacts are just our contacts. They act as leaders on their streets, but they are not Block leaders. That's a different system maintained by the city.
And maybe we could come up with a cool name.
That would be great.
Your brother-in-law calls himself the Block captain, so I don't know. That's legit, but.
And I think a lot of the CCP folks are the same folks that are signed up, because it's,
Yes.
we utilized that program for National Night Out. Like, we were engaging with those folks too. We just made a conscious decision at the beginning of this year, and we had to, because we didn't have that list. Any other comments, or we'll jump to our next, which is very similar, a little similar in many ways to some of the stuff we just talked about too. So, okay, Sarah, LR, do you want to kind of talk a little bit about events, talk about a little bit about 21, and kind of what our thoughts and plans are going forward?
Yep. So I put the link, if everyone could open it, to the proposed event list for 2021. So just to explain, the executive committee asked me to bring forward a list of suggested events for 2021. This is typically something that staff does in January of each year. And so I went through past lists and events. And so what you see before you is the list of things that I'm suggesting. And then at the bottom of that is sort of a laundry list of other ideas that have come up fairly recently that people were interested in. So I selected the ones that are on the top of the list because I felt that they could be done in a COVID safe manner. And we have community support to do these if board members are not interested in leading these. And there's pretty broad community support for a lot of these projects. So the names are recognized and people in the community are excited about them. They are also not very expensive, and some of them have a potential to make money. So by presenting these to you, there's two things really that I'm asking the board. One is, does KFNA want to support this list as their official events of this year? And by doing that, I have an expectation of staff that you're all going to learn enough about the names of these to talk about these, and that you're going to commit basically everybody on almost every event to work for an hour or two. And that might be before the event, or as Chris said, and Chris, I really appreciate you bringing it up, like during an event, to share pictures, to go and be a part of it, and to talk to people as someone from the organization and share your own view of those events from those way. That connection on events is really important, coming from community members instead of just coming from the generic Facebook posts of Kingfield Neighborhood Association. It also really helps with promotion. We found that in the last 24 hours on the empty bowls, just getting neighbors to share the information has doubled attendance for tomorrow night, as opposed to it coming from Kingfield Neighborhood Association. So by committing to this list, I'm asking you guys to commit to at least knowing when Porch Fest is and sharing information about it, and ideally being at it and sharing images. And then we're going to have a quick conversation about the questions are in the agenda, but basically like what's missing from this list, who is missing, like what are populations in the neighborhood that we want to engage with that aren't called out? Could we think of something that goes with them, and what do you want to try? So this list came from a lot of board conversations or community conversations in the past. So I just, how it kind of works is like Empty Bowls was a board project for years and years and years with a lot of board engagement, but it sort of, people moved off the board and it moved into a community project. By staying part of KFNA, I don't need you guys to lead that event, but I do need you to be aware of it. But maybe there's new things that you guys want to lead. So that's a conversation I want you to drop into, is what's missing, who's missing, are there broad areas, you know, safety, does this 100 days of safety sort of cover that? You know, are we covering a range of the seasons and the years, or what else do we want to add? Questions before breakout groups?
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. And I think I would just, the only thing I would just say is we're going to have more conversations about this. But this is kind of the beginning of the year I'd call brainstorm, and then we'll continue to evolve kind of our events plan, especially, and I maybe don't hold in the brainstorming, not understanding where COVID is going to be in, 9 months, like, 6 months, 9 months, whatever. So, thinking about Porch Fest and some of these other bigger events. So let's throw it out there. If you can think of a cool contingency plan that we can do stuff more virtually or socially distance, awesome. Add that idea in there too. But hopefully we'll be back to a little bit more of a togetherness space in the next year or so.
And I would say adding events throughout the course of the year is typically not a problem, but being able to commit to a menu so that I can recruit my volunteers, plan my workload, know what's coming out, plan some of those communications is really helpful to me to make that commitment now. I'm going to throw you into breakout rooms, and I'm going to try to have the option where you can move. It would be great if you could be with people who you weren't with in the last group. So just try to quickly move yourselves around, and it looks like we have 7 minutes or something, Chris.
We have until 8:50.
Okay, I don't know if these are the same breakout rooms or not. So please do try to move yourselves if you can.
So Sarah, if you can send us back at 8:50.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it was the same breakout room, and I don't really know how to move myself.
Had or most anything that folks had. Group 1, are you ready? Does anyone know if they were group 1?
I have no idea. I think I was in group 1. I don't know.
Lisa,
But I can go.
Lisa was.
I was in Lisa's group too. So
Okay.
Lisa, you can go or I can go. It doesn't matter. I can't see what you said, so I'll just go really quick. I said I had 3 ideas. I'll just say one. Maybe a Juneteenth barbecue. I had mentioned that either Jerome or I could like give a little talk as to why Juneteenth is important, and kind of we can bridge that gap between white community members and then people of color, and have a big barbecue celebration time together. The end.
Love it. Group 2.
One of the things we talked about was the importance of the voter education, especially with the Southwest Journal going away for the time being, and with potential weird votes coming up on Katie, I completely drew a blank on.
The charter.
Thank you. The charter amendments. I was like, what is that word? So the charter amendments, maybe, right now, Andrea Jenkins doesn't have opposition, but there are there are multiple people running for our parks district. There are multiple mayoral people running. One of the mayoral candidates used to be on the Lindale Neighborhood Association and now lives in Central. So we could potentially do some sort of forum along with other neighborhood associations in the area to get them into talking to us and learning about them as candidates.
Awesome. Thanks, BJ. All this for the sake of time, I was in group 3. We had a bunch of different ideas, excitement around voter education, get out the vote, discussion around a movie night, especially if we can kind of think about like anti-racist resources, and as well like kid movies and things like that, and partnering with the park board on that. And then some of the kind of like bike ideas, mini open streets, closing Pleasant, and an office opening. If we have a new office, but we never opened it, kinda. So that. Okay, group 4.
Was that us? I can recap really quickly here, but I also, my computer died, so I may have missed a couple of things in between there. But I know that Sarah and David had talked about putting together some kind of how-tos to be able to engage city council, to be able to engage local government, almost like some tutorials that we could potentially put together to help walk people through some steps there. Also, David had a cool idea about doing something around Kingfield itself, and like the architecture and the history of the neighborhood. And then also, I know that the fundraising committee had talked a little bit about this before. There was a pretty good turnout in being able to gain funding for KFNA through using QR codes at the garden party or something similar. So if we did something where it was themed, there were different themes to the events. And then there were a few different potential links that we could set up with like a QR code that was really easy to put up. People, it could say, click here to learn more about today, and to view some different ways to get involved. People could click on that, be able to have that link up to some different places that they could donate to that were local organizations, including KFNA, as well as have maybe some different items about education around different themes and events.
Awesome. Thank you. Anything else anyone wants to share? Sarah?
I just want to say that we didn't have a nice collection note sheet like the 100 Days of Community did for this. So if someone in your group could just itemize everything that you talked about?
We did
and
have
shoot me
a,
an
we
email?
did have a
Did you?
list. Yep.
Bonus. Someone else made it because I didn't.
Any other comments or questions? Awesome. Thank you everyone for participating in that. I'm looking forward both to the kind of the group taking that back and thinking about 100 days of community and community safety. And I think, Sarah, I'll share this sheet with you, but it's in the, it should be in the agenda underneath that agenda item, but looking at that and maybe if you wanted to think about, we all can have a conversation, we could have this conversation with the executive committee too, but how we maybe incorporate some of these ideas or maybe pull them together and what is possible and what's not in the upcoming year. So in the sake of time, we will move on to updates and shares. I think both Katie and L'Oreal, you were part of this last time. The idea is kind of sharing out update from the community, update with yourself, update or anything you want to kind of folks on the board to know. So I didn't change the order from last time, so I apologize. Becky, you are up first again.
I have two things that I'm excited about, I should say. I signed up for a newsletter. It comes via email every day called Anti-Racism Daily. And it's not super long. It's very interesting. And as part of Black History Month, they're also sending out a separate email about an artist, a different artist every day of this month, or artist collective, something that centers around sort of the Black American experience. But it's a great little newsletter. I highly encourage you to sign up for it. And I got my first COVID shot on Saturday. So that was exciting. Hooray! That's it. Yeah.
Thanks, Becky. That's awesome. That's great news. I am next. I'll just share quickly. We had a really great meeting, and thank you for Sarah for facilitating and putting the agenda together around the equitable development scorecard. That's moving forward, and what you're going to see coming out is what we wanted to start with was really kind of like this baseline education piece. Like, what is affordable housing? Why is it hard to build? What's a subsidized developer? What's a developer that builds market rate housing? That sort of thing. And both around transportation, equitable land use, and the different categories of the scorecard. So look for that series. What we're going to be doing is partnering with kind of experts in the community, both in our community and the city at large, and bringing them in for kind of really a couple quick questions. What is this? What is that? And then packaging all that together into this kind of information around development, around changes, around sustainability, all that in our neighborhood. So look for that. It's going to be happening quick. We are partnering with Tangletown and Lena on it. So that is really great too, because we have other folks picking up some of that stuff that we can partner with. So that is my update. Chris H.
I don't really have any updates. So I guess I'll say I'm excited to graduate and be done with school forever.
That's a perfect update. Lisa.
Yeah, hi. Well, I feel like I'm going to up Becky here by saying I actually got my second COVID shot last week, Wednesday. So I'm a week into feeling like I'm immune. But again, still practicing all of the social distancing in the world. Other than that, I did donate to Empty Bowls because unfortunately tomorrow night is my husband's birthday, so I can't really do the virtual event and spend time with everyone else from the neighborhood because it's time for him. So yeah, so that's what I have going on. Not much.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. Alice?
Our neighborhood is still connecting via all the threads we got going a few weeks ago, but it's become a lot more upbeat now. And so I think people are feeling pretty hopeful and they're calming down from where we were a few weeks ago. And I'm hoping to get my COVID shot at the end of the month.
Awesome. Thank you, Alice. David Robbins?
Yeah, not much is new. I think by now I probably know more people that have the COVID vaccine than actually got COVID. it's getting close, but so that's encouraging. That at least shows there's sunlight on the horizon. So.
Awesome. Thanks, David. David S.
Not much news. I am looking forward to the farmers market on the 20th. So I think that's next weekend. So it's the only thing on my calendar that's community focused. Yeah. And
Awesome.
no shots.
That's a good update. Yeah. Mike.
There we go. So yeah, not a whole lot to share. I have to say though that I am excited about the fact that while construction is fully underway next to Lowbrow, which I live about a half a block away from, they're doing a really outstanding job, especially with all the work from home, of keeping things under wraps and keeping it not too intrusive in the community. I know that on the Kingfield page, there were a lot of horror stories about what was going on over at the at our old offices over there with that add-on. And this has been very professional, really getting a lot done without making a lot of noise. So kudos to them.
Awesome. I will share that. We had conversations with them specifically about kind of the pilings, right? And what that was going to do. So that's really, really good to hear. BJ?
Yeah, so anyone who's interested in the winter market, it is at 49th and Chowan from 10 to 1 on Saturday, the 20th. Unlike Chris Hong, I am starting school again. I'm back in school as of January. And I'm doing a certificate in election administration at the Humphrey School. So I needed to disclose to the board, I've already talked to the executive committee, but I will be designing our election, our virtual election for this upcoming year. But I am also up for re-election. So needed to disclose to you all that there may be a conflict of interest. I will not be counting votes. I will not be doing anything like that, but I'll be on the ballot, but also be designing the election itself.
Awesome. Thanks, BJ. Sarah T.
This past weekend, I went to a virtual meeting for the kickoff for Minneapolis United for Rent Control. I'm going to put the link here. Basically, there was over 100 people from around the city there. It was a super exciting meeting, just kind of getting people introduced to the concept of rent control or rent stabilization. There is a petition out there right now. There's just an announcement that there's going to be a public hearing later this month so that rent control can be put on the ballot in 2021. The organizers are building a coalition of organizations. So there was like faith-based groups there. Harrison neighborhood is a part of the coalition. Cedar Riverside Community Council is part of the coalition. So I think that this could be a possible opportunity for KFNA as well, either organizationally or board members individually, or something that we talk about with people here in the neighborhood. So that web link there gives a bunch of info about what it is that people are trying to push for. And I think personally, I think this aligns really well with just, affordable housing initiatives that we have been working on within KFNA. And if anybody is interested in talking more, let me know.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Katie?
Everyone should go see the ice sculpture at the person's yard at Graham and 42nd. It's amazing. Also, I am new to the Kingfield Buy Nothing Facebook group. Someone was gifted a laundry machine via that Facebook group this week, among many other delights such as puzzles, etc. But I just think it is excellent.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. That's Jeremy's house on 42nd and Grand. He's someone who we engage with on a bunch of different stuff. So they're really great there. L'Oreal?
I'll just share a concern that was brought to me, but we've already talked about it. It's crime and safety, so we don't have to dive deep into it again. I'm just wondering if we can schedule, block out some time in a future meeting to talk about it, kind of figure out root causes and figure out actual action steps to take. So that's one. And then my second one is just to personally thank both Sarahs. I have so many questions and I still have so many more questions, and you guys have been so helpful and I'm really thankful for you. So thank you. That's it. I'm done.
Awesome, thank you. And let's touch base on the crime and safety stuff and see, and we can definitely, and I would open this up to all board members too. The executive committee works on setting an agenda. It's based both on like board input, staff input, community input, or I wouldn't even say like things that we've discussed over the next month. So we're always, and I wouldn't say we're encourage board members to come and say, hey, this is something I'd like to talk about. This is how we would like to do it. And we would ask that, you know, if you wanted to lead that or whatever the conversations are, we would love to have board members engage and bring things, whether that's like conversations or we didn't vote on anything tonight, but we also vote on things, right? If you wanted to bring a resolution, if you wanted to bring, make KFNA, if the board wanted to support something, that's all a part of a board member's role. And we can do that. So if you have something, please bring it to the executive committee. We would love to get it on the agenda for upcoming meetings. So thank you everyone for the updates. I will leave it there because we're done and we're a little bit after. So thank you again for joining us. Please reach out if there's anything coming up. So good conversation.
Thanks everyone. Thank you.
Everyone.
Have a good one.
Have a good one.